Welcome to this edition of Optimal IDM's video learning series on the Virtual Identity Server, Optimal IDM's .NET LDAP Virtual Directory. In this video, I will demonstrate the Virtual Identity Server's integration with Microsoft's SharePoint portal server. Let's consider the common use case where a business would like to deploy an external, internet-facing deployment of SharePoint to users that exist not only in an external directory, but also to users that exist in one or more than one internal directory. Some organizations have the need to provide this type of deployment for 50, 60, or even 100 individual Active Directory forests, often where there are no trusts between the forests. This is not possible out of the box with SharePoint alone, as it can only utilize one LDAP directory. Utilizing Optimal IDM's Virtual Identity Server, or as it is often referred to, VIS, organizations can now rapidly deploy SharePoint enterprise-wide across multiple LDAP directories. This can be done without a complicated setup, without losing functionality, or even requiring forest trusts. VIS is a Microsoft-centric LDAP virtual directory written entirely in .NET Managed Code that enhances and extends the Microsoft infrastructure while leveraging the existing investment that has been made. Now I'm going to show you the integration of the Virtual Identity Server and SharePoint firsthand. But first, let me describe the environment that I'm about to demonstrate. I'm using Optimal IDM's LDAP Manager application to browse my LDAP directories. And you can see that I have 3 connections set up in this tool. The first is to Active Directory, and this is the directory that contains all of my internal employees that will be authenticating over to SharePoint. The second directory is Atom. This Atom directory contains the clients that will also be authenticating, and they're my external users. The third connection I have here is to the Virtual Identity Server. Again, you'll notice this looks like a standard LDAP directory. With the key difference here is that this is a real-time proxy of the data that's contained in the connected data stores. Notice we have a connection and a real-time proxy view of the data that's contained in the Active Directory. And this is a one-to-one mapping here. Likewise, we have the same real-time proxy of the data that exists down in the Atom directory. And we see our same users here. A key concept to know is, again, that we're not storing any data here at the virtual directory layer, and instead it's a one-to-one proxy, much like an ISO server proxies data to and from a web server. For example, let's take a look at one of our users' records down in Active Directory. Let's look at Mike Miller. Notice that his title is Supervisor here in Active Directory. And likewise, if we look at his account in the Virtual Identity Server, his title is set to Supervisor. Let's go ahead and make an update via the virtual directory and change his title to Manager. Applying Save, the virtual directory at this point will proxy this request down to the connected data store, which in this case is Active Directory. And notice that when we look at his record now in Active Directory, his title is set to Manager, which is what we just set it to. So again, we have this one-to-one real-time proxy of the data. So now that we've seen a little bit of just in terms of the virtual directory and the proxying capability, and we can see that through one interface, through one connection to the virtual directory, we have a real-time view across multiple LDAP directories. We have one Active Directory and one Atom, but of course this could be 50, 60, 100, as many Active Directory forests or connected directories that you have in your environment. So let's see how this works in terms of the SharePoint experience. So I'm logged in locally into this box as the administrator account. So I'm going to fire up a browser and go directly to SharePoint. Notice that I was logged in seamlessly into SharePoint without being prompted for authentication. This is because VIS interrogated the request, knew that I was logged in as administrator, created the SharePoint token, and provided the sign-on into SharePoint. So VIS was able to leverage my Active Directory credentials, create the SharePoint token, and then seamlessly log me into SharePoint without requiring any further authentications. VIS can handle this across as many forests as you have and does not require any forest trusts and can be installed in your environment in a matter of minutes. So let's go ahead and see how this would look for the external users. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out as administrator. And let's take one more look at our Atom directory here. So in Atom, we have our clients. We have Chloe, Jack, and John. And we put them in this external Atom directory so that we didn't have to put them in our internal Active Directory forest here. So as an external user accesses SharePoint, VIS is going to interrogate their login credentials, see that they're not logged in, and present the login form here. So after a user types in their user ID and password and clicks sign in, SharePoint will pass those credentials over to VIS. VIS is then going to connect to each of its connected directories, in this case Active Directory and Atom, and perform the authentication request. So notice now we're logged in as John Smith, and we have full access to SharePoint just like that internal administrator account. But now I'm going to show you another powerful feature of the Virtual Identity Server and how we're using that within SharePoint. So the concept that I'm going to show you here is dynamic groups. Dynamic groups of the virtual directory are groups in which the membership to the group is dynamic. Rather than placing people in a group that's static, where you're actually adding users to it manually or via another process, we calculate the group membership based on data on a user, and it's computed dynamically by the virtual directory. So taking a look at this marketing docs group, for example, this is based on the dynamic group filter object class equals users, title equals manager. So any user that VIS sees with the title equal manager will be a member of this dynamic group. So let's go ahead and test that filter. And let's see that we have users from Active Directory and Atom that all meet that criteria and are a member of this group. And notice actually John Smith, who we're logged into SharePoint as right now, is a member of this group. So now let's see how that applies to SharePoint itself. Clicking back over here in our window, and we're logged in as John Smith, I'm going to go to this Marketing Materials document folder. Now notice here within this folder I have full permissions to SharePoint, so I can see all of these different menu options. And we could take a look here at the document library settings and take a look at the permissions for this document library. We're going to see that why I have permissions, full permissions to it, is by virtue of this domain group that is seeing marketing docs. And of course it says VIS roles marketing docs, full control. So that's actually that dynamic group that we just saw that I'm a member of, logged in here as John Smith. And so John Smith's a member of this dynamic group, and therefore he has full control to the marketing docs folder. So now let's see if we go and change the data on John Smith. So I will come down here to the virtual directory, drill down on John Smith's record, and notice here actually when we take a look here, member of, you see that he's a member of the all users dynamic group and the marketing docs. It looks like a standard Active Directory group to SharePoint. But I'm going to change his title from manager to supervisor. And when I change this, make the save, come off of his record, come right back on. Notice that the virtual directory is in real time computing the membership for that group, and I'm no longer a member of the marketing docs folder. So on the next browser refresh here, I am no longer going to have full control to the marketing materials folder within SharePoint. So now you have dynamic role-based access control within SharePoint. Content is dynamically generated here and protected by the virtual directory. This reduces administration of SharePoint and lowers the total cost of ownership. So let's now see one additional capability of the Virtual Identity Server that we're taking advantage of here within our SharePoint deployment. So I'm going to go back over to our management console, and I'm going to bring up our reporting dashboard. All activity that comes through the virtual identity server is optionally logged to a SQL Server database. And in that SQL Server database, we are storing, via the virtual directory, all activity that comes through it. So for example, I can run a failed authentication report. And notice I have no failed authentications within my environment here. But running the successful authentications, I see the authentications that VIS processed just a short time ago that we ran. So this data could be queried by our dashboard reporting system here, or via any SQL reporting tool that you may be using. A little bit about the dashboard here, reporting system. This report then, if we would like, we could export it out to PDF, Word, Excel, and we can export that out, and then we could email it to somebody. Optionally, we could also save this report and schedule it ourselves via this interface and ask it to be emailed out once a week, once a month, to a given set of users, and we can say the start date that we would like to have this. So periodically via Windows service, these reports would be run and emailed out scheduled. So now you have a complete reporting infrastructure around your SharePoint deployment as well. We also have audit records. So again, all activity was optionally logged over here to the SQL Server database. And notice here we have a complete before and after picture of data that was changed. We had changed the data on the user from supervisor to manager, and likewise we're seeing that data here represented in this report. So you have complete audit and compliance reporting on top of your SharePoint deployment as well, further extending the solution. In fact, one of the other capabilities here is being able to see searches as they're coming into the virtual directory. So we now have not only the date and time, what the search was, search base, result code, but also the processing time. So you could do powerful analytics on application usage within your environment, because all activity, again, is getting logged through the virtual identity server. We can see which queries are the inefficient queries and tune our SharePoint deployment and virtual directory environment for the optimal performance. To recap, I demonstrated 3 important capabilities of the virtual identity server in this video. 1, the rapid, easy-to-deploy, decentralized authentication solution that leverages identities at their authoritative source. Users that have already authenticated to Active Directory have a seamless single sign-on solution experience where there is no need for an additional login. 2, I demonstrated the robust, dynamic, role-based access control model that reduces administration and increases security in SharePoint while lowering the total cost of ownership. And 3, the comprehensive audit and compliance with built-in audit logging and out-of-the-box reports. Together, the virtual identity server further enhances and extends the Microsoft infrastructure while leveraging the existing investment that has been made.